The crystal chandeliers of the Metropolitan Hotel's grand ballroom cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as I stood frozen in absolute horror. Victoria Pemberton's perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at me like a weapon, her voice carrying across the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos with the precision of a knife. "Oh, Sarah dear," she said, her tone dripping with the kind of false sweetness that made my skin crawl. "I'm absolutely certain you understand that the Pemberton Foundation Scholarship Committee requires a particular, how shall I put this delicately, caliber of candidate, someone who truly embodies not just academic achievement, but the refinement and breeding that comes with generations of proper upbringing. My name is Sarah Chen, and at that moment, standing in my carefully pressed but obviously secondhand dress from the local thrift store, I felt every pair of eyes in the room turn toward me. The charity gala for the Pemberton Foundation, the same foundation whose scholarship I had desperately applied for to complete my PhD in molecular biology, had suddenly transformed from an elegant evening into my personal nightmare. The scholarship wasn't just important to me, it was everything. Without it, I would have to drop out of graduate school in my final year, abandoning 5 years of grueling research on revolutionary cancer treatments. Without it, I would lose the laboratory space where I conducted experiments that had already caught the attention of several pharmaceutical companies. Without it, my dreams of changing the world through science would crumble into dust. "Mrs. Pemberton," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I have maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA throughout my graduate studies. I have 3 peer-reviewed research papers published in top-tier journals, including one in Nature Medicine that has been cited over 200 times. My research on targeted cancer cell therapy has been presented at international conferences, and I have received recognition from the National Science Foundation." The silence that followed was deafening. 200 of the city's most influential people, doctors, lawyers, business moguls, politicians, all waited to see how this confrontation would unfold. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their entertainment at my expense. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. She turned to the crowd as if I were a amusing sideshow rather than a human being pleading for her future. "Academic achievements are certainly admirable, my dear child," she said, her voice projecting across the ballroom so everyone could hear every humiliating word. "But you must understand that the Pemberton Foundation represents something far more significant than mere test scores and laboratory experiments. We represent legacy, tradition, the kind of breeding and sophistication that comes from generations of proper society. We simply cannot associate our distinguished name with someone who so clearly lacks the refinement, the social graces, the inherent understanding of excellence that our scholarship recipients must possess." She paused dramatically, her eyes scanning my appearance with the kind of theatrical disdain that would have been impressive if it weren't so cruel. "I mean, just look at yourself, dear. That dress, is it from Walmart, Target perhaps? And those shoes? Oh my goodness, are they actually from Payless? How could we possibly expect someone of your background to represent the Pemberton Foundation at prestigious events, to network with our distinguished alumni, to uphold the standards we've maintained for over 50 years?" The crowd's reaction was immediate and devastating. Some gasped in shock at her bluntness, others whispered behind their hands, and I could see several people actually smirking at my public humiliation. The chandeliers above seemed to blur as tears threatened to spill from my eyes. Madison Pemberton, Victoria's 24-year-old daughter, stepped forward with the predatory grace of someone who had learned cruelty from a master. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than I earned in 6 months of my 3 part-time jobs, her jewelry sparkling under the ballroom lights like armor made of diamonds. "Mother is absolutely right," Madison announced, her voice carrying the entitled confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in her life. "The scholarship should obviously go to someone who fits our image, someone who understands what it means to represent excellence. Someone like Reginald Sterling III, you know, the Sterling family from the pharmaceutical fortune. Or perhaps Amanda Ashford, whose family donated the new library wing at Harvard. She looked me up and down with undisguised disgust. I mean, we attend the same university, and I've seen you serving coffee at campus events, cleaning tables, working in the cafeteria. How embarrassing would it be for our foundation if our scholarship recipient was literally serving drinks to our other scholars at networking events? The laughter that followed felt like physical blows. These people, these supposedly educated, cultured, charitable individuals, were finding genuine entertainment in my humiliation. Victoria smiled with satisfaction, clearly pleased with her daughter's contribution to my destruction. "You see, Sarah," Victoria continued, her voice now taking on the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child, "charity work and academic funding require a certain level of sophistication. Our scholarship recipients attend galas like this one. They network with Fortune 500 CEOs. They represent our foundation at international conferences. They need to know which fork to use for the salad course, how to engage in meaningful conversation about art and culture, how to carry themselves with the kind of natural elegance that simply cannot be taught." She gestured broadly to the assembled crowd. "Everyone here tonight has donated thousands of dollars to our foundation because they trust our judgment, because they believe in our ability to identify true potential. How could we possibly maintain that trust if we selected someone who would so obviously be out of place in these circles?" Dr. Richard Blackwell, a prominent neurosurgeon who served on the foundation's board, nodded in agreement. Victoria raises an excellent point. The scholarship isn't just about academic support. It's about opening doors, creating connections, building the kind of network that leads to real success. The recipient needs to be someone who can hold their own in any social situation. His wife, Priscilla, added her voice to the chorus of agreement. It would be doing the girl a disservice, really. Imagine how uncomfortable she would be at the annual scholarship recipient dinner at the country club. She would feel so out of place, so overwhelmed. It would be cruel to put her in that position. More voices joined in, each one adding another layer to my humiliation. They spoke about me as if I weren't standing right there, as if I were an object to be evaluated, rather than a person with feelings, dreams, and desperations. "The poor thing probably doesn't even own appropriate attire for formal events," observed Mrs. Harriet Worthington, the wife of a federal judge. "And think about the networking events in Manhattan," added James Morrison, a Wall Street executive. "She would need to engage with pharmaceutical executives, research directors, venture capitalists. The social skills required for those environments are simply innate. You either have them or you don't." Through all of this, I remained silent, my face burning with shame and my heart pounding with a mixture of humiliation and rage. These people had no idea who I really was, what I had accomplished, what I was capable of. They saw only the surface. The thrift store dress, the worn shoes, the exhaustion that came from working 3 jobs while maintaining perfect grades in one of the most demanding PhD programs in the country. What they couldn't see was that while I was serving them coffee at university fundraisers, I was also developing revolutionary cancer treatments in the lab. While I was cleaning their tables, I was also writing research papers that would soon transform oncology. While they were judging me for my appearance, I was creating intellectual property that would soon be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That night, I was just a scholarship girl being publicly humiliated by people who would never have to choose between buying textbooks and eating dinner, who would never have to work 20 hours a week while carrying a full course load, who would never have to smile politely while being treated like a servant. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Victoria delivered her final blow. "I'm sure you're a lovely girl, Sarah, and I'm certain you work very hard. But the Pemberton Foundation Scholarship requires more than just academic achievement. It requires the kind of natural sophistication and social grace that comes from proper breeding. Perhaps you should consider applying for one of the more, practical scholarships available to students of your background. There are several organizations that specifically help first-generation college students, working-class children trying to better themselves. Those might be more appropriate for someone in your situation. The dismissal was complete and devastating. She had managed to make it sound as if she were doing me a favor, as if rejecting me was actually an act of kindness. The crowd began to disperse, the entertainment value of my humiliation having run its course. I stood there for another moment, watching as these people returned to their conversations about vacation homes in the Hamptons, their children's acceptances to Ivy League schools, their latest art acquisitions. Nobody looked at me with sympathy or concern. I was invisible again, irrelevant, a minor disruption in their evening of self-congratulation. Madison approached me as I gathered what little dignity I had left. "Don't take it personally," she said, her tone suggesting that she thought she was being kind. "Mother just has very high standards. It's nothing against you personally. You're probably quite intelligent in your own way. It's just that some people are meant for certain environments and others aren't. You'll find your place eventually, I'm sure." With that final insult disguised as comfort, she walked away, leaving me alone in the corner of the ballroom where I had been systematically destroyed. I walked out of the Metropolitan Hotel that night with my head held high, but inside, I was planning something that would change everything. Because what Victoria Pemberton and her wealthy friends didn't know, what no one in that room could have possibly imagined, was that the scholarship girl they had just humiliated was already on the verge of becoming one of the youngest and most successful biotech entrepreneurs in history. 3 months after that devastating night, my phone rang with the call that changed everything. "Dr. Chen?" said the voice of Dr. Marcus Webb, Chief Scientific Officer at PharmaCorp International, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. "We've been following your research on targeted cancer cell therapy with great interest. Your work about inducing apoptosis in resistant tumor cells while leaving healthy tissue unaffected, it's revolutionary." I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, surrounded by medical journals and lab reports, surviving on ramen noodles and coffee while working 18-hour days in the laboratory. The irony wasn't lost on me that representatives from a billion-dollar corporation were calling me while I was wearing the same thrift store jeans I'd owned for 3 years. "We would like to make you an offer for exclusive licensing rights to your research," Dr. Webb continued. "We're prepared to offer $800 million. Plus royalties on all future treatments developed from your work." I set down my cup of instant coffee with trembling hands. $800 million. More money than I could have imagined in my wildest dreams. More money than the entire Pemberton family fortune, accumulated over generations of old money investments and social connections. But I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. I had learned something valuable from Victoria Pemberton's cruelty, the power of being underestimated. So I negotiated carefully, structuring the deal through a complex web of holding companies and legal entities that would keep my identity private, while I built something much larger than a simple research patent sale. Within 6 months of that phone call, I had founded Chen Biotech, using the pharmaceutical licensing deal as seed money to recruit the world's best scientists, acquire cutting-edge laboratory facilities, and develop multiple revolutionary treatments simultaneously. My company's valuation grew exponentially as each new breakthrough attracted more investors, more partnerships, more recognition from the scientific community. But I remained in the shadows, letting my lawyers and business managers handle all public-facing activities. To the outside world, Chen Biotech was run by a reclusive genius who preferred to focus on research rather than publicity. I continued living in my small apartment, wearing my simple clothes, and most importantly, I kept detailed records of everyone who had ever dismissed me, ignored me, or treated me as if I were beneath them. The Pemberton Foundation had no idea that their biggest anonymous donor for the past 2 years had been me. Through a carefully constructed network of shell companies and charitable trusts, I had quietly become their primary source of funding, providing over 60% of their annual budget. Every board meeting, every scholarship decision, every public statement they made, I knew about it all because I was essentially paying for their operations. I also knew that Victoria Pemberton had continued her pattern of discrimination, rejecting dozens of qualified students whose only crime was coming from working-class backgrounds or attending public universities. I watched through my network of informants as she awarded scholarships to the children of her social circle, regardless of their academic achievements or potential contributions to their fields. The time had come for my revenge, but it needed to be perfect, public, and permanent. When the invitation arrived for the Pemberton Foundation's annual Excellence Awards ceremony, the same event where I had been humiliated 3 years earlier, I knew the moment had arrived. The venue was, ironically, the Metropolitan Hotel's Grand Ballroom, the same room where Victoria had destroyed my confidence and nearly ended my dreams. I spent weeks orchestrating every detail of what would happen that night. Through one of my subsidiary companies, I booked the venue at triple the usual rate, ensuring that the Pemberton Foundation would be completely dependent on my financial support for their most important event of the year. I arranged for professional photographers and videographers, knowing that what was about to happen would need to be documented for posterity. I even had my legal team prepare a comprehensive presentation detailing 3 years of discriminatory scholarship decisions, complete with financial analyses of rejected candidates' subsequent achievements. The evening of the gala, I arrived early and positioned myself at the back of the ballroom, watching as the same crowd of wealthy elites who had witnessed my humiliation 3 years earlier filed in, wearing their designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Victoria Pemberton made her grand entrance wearing a stunning silver dress that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries, her diamonds catching the light from the same crystal chandeliers that had illuminated my shame years before. She worked the room with practiced grace, accepting congratulations on another successful year of maintaining the Foundation's high standards and supporting only the most deserving candidates. I listened as she repeated the same phrases about breeding, sophistication, and natural excellence that had destroyed me years earlier. Madison was there too, now working as the Foundation's Director of Scholar Relations, a nepotistic position that had been created specifically for her after her own unremarkable graduation from college. She moved through the crowd with the same entitled confidence I remembered, discussing her recent engagement to the son of a prominent real estate developer and her plans for an elaborate destination wedding. Dr. Richard Blackwell approached the podium as the evening's master of ceremonies, his voice booming across the ballroom as he welcomed the distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pemberton Foundation's annual Excellence Awards ceremony. Tonight, we celebrate another year of identifying and supporting the brightest young minds who represent the very best of academic achievement, combined with the personal character and social grace that will make them leaders in their fields. The applause was enthusiastic, these people genuinely believing that they were part of something noble and important. They had no idea that their charity was built on discrimination and prejudice, that their high standards were actually just elaborate justifications for maintaining social barriers. This year, Dr. Blackwell continued, we're particularly excited to present our findings on the long-term success of Pemberton Foundation scholars. Our recipients have gone on to positions at top law firms, Fortune 500 companies, prestigious medical practices, and influential government positions. This success rate demonstrates the wisdom of our selection process and our commitment to identifying not just academic achievement, but the complete package of qualities that lead to real-world success. More applause, more self-congratulation, more reinforcement of the belief system that had nearly destroyed my future. Victoria took the stage, her smile radiant as she looked out over the sea of supportive faces. Thank you all for being here tonight, and for your continued support of our mission. The Pemberton Foundation remains committed to excellence in all its forms, academic, professional, and personal. We understand that true scholarship means more than just good grades. It means cultivating the kind of refined, sophisticated individuals who can represent our foundation with distinction in any setting. She paused for effect, her voice taking on the tone of someone about to share something particularly exciting. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that we have a very special surprise. Through the generous support of our anonymous donors, we are able to present our Excellence Awards with a keynote address from someone who truly embodies everything our foundation represents. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Chen Biotech, one of the most successful pharmaceutical companies in the world, Dr. Sarah Chen. The confusion on Victoria's face was immediate and profound as I walked onto the stage. She had clearly been given a different name by my representatives, probably expecting some distinguished older gentleman with an impressive resume and the right social connections. Her smile faltered as recognition slowly dawned, her brain struggling to process the impossibility of what she was seeing. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some recognized me immediately from my previous humiliation. Others were simply confused by the dramatic change in Victoria's demeanor. But everyone could sense that something significant was about to happen. "Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton," I said, taking the microphone with steady hands. "It's wonderful to be back at the Metropolitan Hotel. The last time I was in this room, exactly 3 years ago, I learned some incredibly valuable lessons about excellence, standards, and the true nature of character." I clicked to my first slide, displaying the Chen Biotech logo along with our company valuation, $2.3 billion and growing. Chen Biotech has developed 7 revolutionary cancer treatments that are currently saving thousands of lives worldwide. Our therapies have generated over $10 billion in revenue, created more than 15,000 high-paying jobs, and funded research initiatives at over 100 universities globally. We hold patents on treatments that have fundamentally changed how oncologists approach cancer care, and our work has been recognized with awards from the World Health Organization, the Nobel Committee, and the National Academy of Sciences. Victoria's face had gone completely pale, but she couldn't leave the stage without creating an even more dramatic scene than was already unfolding. The audience was beginning to murmur as they realized this wasn't going to be a typical keynote address. But none of this would have been possible, I continued, without a very important lesson I learned right here in this room 3 years ago. A lesson about how not to judge people, how not to evaluate potential, and how not to determine someone's worth based on the price of their clothing or the prestige of their family name. I clicked to the next slide, showing a photograph from that night 3 years ago, an image captured by one of the society photographers that showed me standing alone and humiliated, while Victoria and her friends looked on with amusement. 3 years ago, I was a PhD candidate in molecular biology with perfect grades, multiple published research papers, and groundbreaking work on cancer cell behavior that was already attracting international attention. I was also broke, working 3 jobs to pay for my education, and wearing a dress from the thrift store because I couldn't afford anything else. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Several people pulled out their phones, recognizing that they were witnessing what would clearly become a viral moment. I applied for a Pemberton Foundation scholarship not because I wanted charity, but because I needed the funding to complete research that I knew could save lives. I came to this very room to present my case, to explain my work, to demonstrate my potential contributions to science and society. I gestured toward Victoria, who stood frozen beside me like a deer caught in headlights. Mrs. Victoria Pemberton looked at my thrift store dress, my worn shoes, and my obvious exhaustion from working multiple jobs, and she told me, in front of all of you, that I didn't have the breeding or caliber to represent the Pemberton Foundation, that academic excellence wasn't enough if you didn't possess the refinement and social grace that comes from proper upbringing. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on every word. She was absolutely right about one thing. I didn't fit the image she had in mind for a Pemberton scholar. I was just a scholarship girl from a working-class family trying to earn my way through graduate school while developing treatments that could revolutionize cancer care. What she didn't know, what none of you knew, was that I was already developing the research that would transform my field and create billions of dollars in value. I clicked to the next slide, showing newspaper headlines from major publications. Chen biotech breakthrough extends cancer survival rates by 400%. Revolutionary treatment approved by FDA in record time. Young entrepreneur becomes youngest woman on Fortune 500 list. A most interesting part of this story, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word, is what happened after Mrs. Pemberton decided I wasn't worthy of her foundation's support. You see, I didn't give up. I didn't change my research focus or abandon my dreams. I simply worked harder, pushed further, and eventually achieved success that surpassed anything your foundation has ever produced. Victoria finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Sarah, I had no idea. Of course you didn't, I replied, turning to face her directly. You never bothered to look beyond the surface. You never considered that someone who serves coffee might also be developing life-saving treatments in their spare time. You never imagined that someone from a working-class background might possess the kind of brilliance and determination that changes the world. I clicked to the next slide, showing financial records that made several people in the audience gasp audibly. For the past 2 years, Chen Biotech has been the Pemberton Foundation's largest donor. Through our charitable trust and various subsidiary companies, we have provided over $4 million in funding, approximately 60% of our annual budget. That's right, the scholarship girl you deemed unworthy has been keeping your foundation operational. The shock on Victoria's face was complete and devastating. Her entire world, her sense of superiority, her belief in her own judgment, her foundation's independence, was crumbling in real time in front of hundreds of witnesses. But funding your organization was just the beginning, I continued. Over the past 2 years, I have carefully documented every scholarship decision made by this foundation. I have records of 43 exceptional students who were rejected not for academic reasons, but because they didn't fit your image of what success should look like. I clicked to a series of slides showing photographs and achievements of rejected applicants. This is Maria Santos, rejected because she attended community college before transferring to a 4-year university. She has since developed groundbreaking research on genetic markers for hereditary diseases. This is David Kim, rejected because his parents own a small grocery store rather than a corporation. He has created artificial intelligence algorithms that are revolutionizing medical diagnosis. This is Jennifer Williams, rejected because she grew up in public housing. She has developed sustainable energy solutions that are being implemented worldwide. With each slide, the audience grew more uncomfortable. These weren't abstract statistics. These were real people with faces, names, and extraordinary achievements that the foundation had dismissed. Every single one of these individuals has gone on to make significant contributions to their fields, despite being rejected by your foundation for reasons that had nothing to do with their potential or qualifications. Their combined achievements in just 3 years have exceeded the lifetime contributions of all Pemberton scholars combined. The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria looked as if she might faint. Madison was staring at her phone in apparent distress, and the audience was shifting uncomfortably as they realized the extent of the discrimination they had been supporting. So now we come to the question of what happens next, I said, my voice carrying across the ballroom with complete authority. The Pemberton Foundation has a choice. You can continue operating with your current discriminatory practices, in which case Chen Biotech will immediately withdraw all funding, and I will personally ensure that every major donor in this room and every media outlet in the country knows exactly how you've been conducting your affairs. The threat was clear and devastating. Without Chen Biotech's financial support, the foundation would immediately face bankruptcy. Without the support of the donors in the room, it would have no hope of recovery. And with negative media coverage exposing their discriminatory practices, their reputation would be permanently destroyed. Or, I continued, you can accept a complete restructuring of your scholarship program, with new leadership, new criteria, and new oversight to ensure that future selections are based solely on academic merit and potential for positive impact, regardless of background, appearance, or social connections. Victoria's hands were trembling as she gripped the podium. Her entire identity was wrapped up in the foundation that bore her family's name, and now it was being taken away from her, unless she agreed to abandon everything she believed about social hierarchy and proper breeding. "Mrs. Pemberton," I said, turning to face her directly, "since you're so concerned with maintaining standards and ensuring that scholarship recipients can handle pressure and represent the foundation appropriately, I have a specific proposition for you." The crowd leaned forward, sensing that the most dramatic moment was yet to come. "You will personally contact every student who has been rejected by this foundation in the past 5 years due to non-academic criteria, and you will offer each of them a full scholarship along with a written apology explaining exactly why they were initially rejected. You will also spend 1 day each month for the next 2 years working in our research laboratories, learning about the actual work that scientists do, and writing detailed reports about your experiences that will be published in the Foundation's newsletter." The audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. Victoria Pemberton, socialite and arbiter of refined taste, working in a laboratory alongside graduate students she had previously dismissed. The woman who had never worked a day in her life, learning to conduct experiments, clean equipment, and understand the unglamorous reality of scientific research. "Furthermore," I continued, "Madison will resign from her position as Director of Scholar Relations and be replaced by a professional administrator with experience in merit-based academic selection. The Foundation's board will be expanded to include representatives from working-class backgrounds, first-generation college students, and individuals who have experienced the kind of discrimination your current practices perpetuate." Madison finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled protest. "This is ridiculous. You can't just take over our foundation. We have legal rights." I smiled at her with the same condescending tone her mother had used on me 3 years earlier. "Actually, Madison dear, when you accept 60% of your funding from a single source, you have essentially given that source controlling interest in your operations. My lawyers have been quite thorough in documenting the extent of Chen Biotech's financial involvement in your foundation's activities. You're welcome to fight this in court, but I suspect your legal fees alone would bankrupt what's left of your organization." The transformation happening in Victoria's face was remarkable. The arrogance and superiority that had defined her for decades were collapsing into something approaching genuine fear. Her foundation, her social standing, her entire sense of identity were all dependent on her next words. She stammered, looking out at the crowd of wealthy donors, who were now seeing her in a completely different light. "I accept your terms." The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps, applause, and confused murmuring. Some people seemed genuinely moved by the story and impressed by the justice of the outcome. Others appeared horrified by the public humiliation of someone they had considered part of their social circle. Everyone seemed to understand that they had just witnessed a fundamental shift in power dynamics. But I wasn't finished yet. "There's one more thing," I said, clicking to my final slide. The image showed the architectural plans for a new research facility. Chen Biotech is establishing the Merit Excellence Research Institute, a facility dedicated to supporting scientists and innovators whose potential has been overlooked by traditional institutions. The Institute will provide full funding for research projects based solely on scientific merit, regardless of the researcher's educational background, family connections, or social status. The facility and the architectural plans was enormous. A state-of-the-art complex with advanced laboratories, research equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and housing for visiting scientists from around the world. The Institute will be staffed by many of the exceptional individuals who were rejected by this foundation and others like it. Maria Santos will head our genetics research division. David Kim will lead our artificial intelligence applications department. Jennifer Williams will direct our sustainable technology initiatives. We will be joined by dozens of other brilliant minds who were dismissed because they didn't fit someone's narrow definition of what success should look like. The message was clear. The people Victoria had rejected weren't just going to succeed despite her discrimination. They were going to thrive and create something far more impressive than anything her foundation had ever accomplished. As I concluded my presentation, the ballroom erupted in genuine applause. The combination of justice served, dramatic revelation, and inspiration for positive change had created a moment that would be talked about for years to come. Victoria remained on the stage, looking shell-shocked and defeated. The woman who had spent decades building her sense of superiority on the systematic exclusion of others was now facing the complete destruction of that worldview. Madison had disappeared entirely, probably fleeing to avoid further embarrassment. The board members were clustering together, engaged in urgent whispered conversations about damage control and legal implications. But the most remarkable change was in the audience itself. People who had witnessed my original humiliation were now approaching me with admiration and respect. Some were offering business cards. Others were requesting meetings to discuss potential collaborations. The same individuals who had found entertainment in my previous destruction were now eager to associate themselves with my success. Over the following months, the transformation of the Pemberton Foundation was swift and comprehensive. Victoria's first task was to contact every student who had been rejected for discriminatory reasons, a process that required her to confront the full extent of the harm her prejudices had caused. The first call was to Maria Santos, the community college transfer student whose genetic research had been deemed interesting but not Pemberton-worthy. "Mrs. Pemberton?" Maria's voice was understandably confused when Victoria called her directly. "Yes, dear. I'm calling to apologize and to offer you a full scholarship retroactively, along with funding for your current research project." "I don't understand. You rejected my application 3 years ago. You said my background wasn't appropriate for your foundation." Victoria's voice was barely audible. "I was wrong. Terribly, inexcusably wrong. Your work on hereditary disease markers is groundbreaking, and I should have recognized that immediately. Instead, I focused on irrelevant factors that had nothing to do with your qualifications or potential." The conversation was painful for Victoria, but it was the first of many similar calls she would have to make. Each one forced her to confront another instance of her prejudice, another talented individual she had dismissed, another opportunity for positive impact that she had wasted. Her monthly laboratory sessions were even more transformative. I assigned her to work directly with graduate students from backgrounds similar to mine, learning to prepare cell cultures, conduct experiments, and analyze data. The first day, she arrived wearing a designer outfit that was completely inappropriate for laboratory work. "Mrs. Pemberton," said Dr. Martinez, the lab supervisor I had specifically chosen for her education, "you'll need to change into appropriate safety equipment. Lab coats, goggles, and closed-toe shoes are required at all times." Victoria looked at the basic white lab coat with obvious distaste. "Isn't there something more flattering? Perhaps in a different color?" "Ma'am, this is a research laboratory, not a fashion show. Safety regulations apply to everyone equally, regardless of their social status outside these walls." About first day, Victoria learned to pipette solutions, a task requiring precision and patience that she had never developed. Her perfectly manicured nails made it difficult to handle the equipment properly. and she struggled with measurements that the graduate students performed effortlessly. "I don't understand," she complained after spilling a culture sample for the third time. "Why is this so difficult?" Marcus, a PhD student whose scholarship application she had rejected 2 years earlier, patiently explained the technique again. "It takes practice, Mrs. Pemberton. Most of us have been doing this for years while working our way through school." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The woman who had claimed that certain people lacked the refinement necessary for success was struggling with basic laboratory tasks that her rejected applicants had mastered long ago. But gradually something remarkable began to happen. As Victoria spent more time in the laboratory, working alongside the dedicated graduate students and postdocs, she began to understand what real excellence looked like. She saw the passion in their eyes as they discussed their research, the excitement when experiments yielded promising results, the determination when setbacks required them to start over. "Why do you work such long hours?" she asked Jennifer, a student studying renewable energy systems who often stayed in the lab until midnight. "Because this work could help solve the climate crisis," Jennifer replied simply. "If I can develop more efficient solar cell technology, it could change how the entire world generates electricity. How could I not give everything I have to that goal?" Victoria had never encountered that kind of dedication to something larger than personal advancement. In her world, people worked to accumulate wealth, status, and social connections. The idea of working passionately toward goals that would benefit humanity was foreign to her experience. 3 months into her laboratory work, Victoria published her first monthly report in the Foundation's newsletter. "I have spent the past 3 months working alongside some of the most dedicated and brilliant individuals I have ever encountered. These graduate students and researchers, many of whom were rejected by our foundation for reasons I now recognize as shameful, demonstrate a level of commitment and excellence that puts my previous understanding of those concepts to shame. I've learned to prepare cell cultures, conduct experiments, and analyze data. More importantly, I have learned that true refinement comes not from designer clothing or family pedigree, but from the dedication to making the world a better place through hard work and intellectual honesty. I publicly acknowledge that my previous approach to scholarship selection was discriminatory, harmful, and completely contrary to the actual mission of supporting excellence in education and research. I commit to spending the remainder of my time with this foundation working to undo the damage I have caused." The newsletter was distributed to all foundation donors, scholarship recipients, and rejected applicants. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Former donors who had supported the foundation's discriminatory practices quietly withdrew their support, while new donors inspired by the transformation began contributing to the reformed organization. Madison initially fought against the changes, attempting to rally support from family, friends, and social connections. She started a whisper campaign suggesting that I had somehow coerced or blackmailed her mother into the transformation. But her efforts backfired spectacularly when several rejected applicants went public with their stories. The media coverage was extensive, with major newspapers and television programs featuring detailed accounts of the Foundation's discriminatory practices, alongside profiles of the exceptional achievements of rejected students. Madison found herself increasingly isolated as former friends distanced themselves from the scandal. Her engagement to the real estate developer's son was quietly called off when his family decided that association with the Pemberton name had become a liability. Eventually, Madison approached me directly, requesting a private meeting at my office. "Dr. Chen," she said, her previous arrogance replaced by genuine nervousness, "I want to apologize for my behavior, both at the gala 3 years ago and since then. I realize now that I was wrong." I studied her carefully, trying to determine if this was genuine remorse or simply another attempt at damage control. "What exactly are you apologizing for, Madison? For treating you badly, for judging you based on your appearance instead of your accomplishments, for perpetuating a system that hurt people who deserved better. Her voice cracked slightly as she continued. I've been thinking a lot about that night, about what I said and how I acted. I was cruel, and I was wrong. And I hurt someone who was genuinely trying to make the world better through their work. I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. The Madison sitting across from me was very different from the entitled young woman who had mocked my thrift store dress 3 years earlier. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple, professional attire. Her arrogant demeanor had been replaced by something approaching humility. "What do you want from me, Madison?" "I want to learn," she said, surprising me with her directness. "I want to understand what real excellence looks like. I want to do something meaningful with my life instead of just coasting on my family's reputation." It was a request I hadn't expected, but after several long conversations, I agreed to give her a chance. Madison enrolled in graduate school to study education policy, focusing specifically on increasing access for underrepresented students. She started working part-time at a community college, helping first-generation students navigate the application process for 4-year universities. The change in her was gradual, but genuine. She began volunteering at homeless shelters, tutoring students from low-income families, and using her social connections not to maintain exclusive barriers, but to open doors for people who had been excluded. A year after our confrontation at the gala, Madison published an op-ed in the local newspaper titled "Confessions of a Reformed Elitist." In it, she detailed her own transformation and called on other wealthy individuals to examine their own prejudices and use their resources to create opportunities, rather than maintain barriers. I spent the first 25 years of my life believing that my family's wealth and social status made me inherently superior to people from different backgrounds, she wrote. It took a public humiliation and a hard look at my own behavior to realize that I had never actually accomplished anything meaningful on my own. My privilege had blinded me to the real excellence that surrounded me every day. The op-ed went viral, sparking a national conversation about class discrimination in educational and professional settings. Madison became an unexpected spokesperson for wealth accountability and social justice, using her insider knowledge of elite circles to expose discriminatory practices in other foundations, clubs, and institutions. Meanwhile, Victoria's transformation continued to deepen. By the end of her first year working in the laboratory, she had developed a genuine appreciation for scientific research and the people who dedicated their lives to it. Her monthly reports became increasingly passionate and informed, reflecting a growing understanding of the importance of the work being conducted around her. Today, I observed Maria Santos present her research on genetic markers for Huntington's disease, she wrote in one report. The precision of her methodology, the clarity of her presentation, and the potential impact of her findings left me in awe. This is the same young woman I rejected 3 years ago because she had attended community college. My prejudice nearly prevented groundbreaking medical research that could help thousands of families. Victoria began using her social connections in ways she never had before. She organized fundraising dinners where the guests were graduate students presenting their research, rather than wealthy socialites discussing their latest acquisitions. She convinced her wealthy friends to fund scholarships based on merit rather than social connections, often by showing them the remarkable achievements of students from non-traditional backgrounds. The Pemberton Foundation itself was completely transformed. Under new leadership and with revised selection criteria, it began identifying and supporting truly exceptional students regardless of their backgrounds. The Foundation's success rate improved dramatically as scholars chosen for their actual potential rather than their social credentials went on to make significant contributions in their fields. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the Foundation's annual gala. Instead of being held at an exclusive hotel with expensive tickets that excluded most people, the event was moved to university campuses and community centers. The speakers were scholarship recipients sharing their research and achievements rather than wealthy donors congratulating themselves on their generosity. 2 years after my confrontation with Victoria, I attended one of these reformed galas as a guest rather than an adversary. The event was held at the community college where Maria Santos had started her education, and she was the keynote speaker, presenting her research on genetic therapies that were entering clinical trials. Victoria introduced Maria with genuine pride and admiration. Dr. Maria Santos represents everything the Pemberton Foundation should have been supporting from the beginning, she said to the diverse audience of students, faculty, community members, and reformed donors. Her work on hereditary diseases will save countless lives, and it all started in the biology laboratory right here at Metro Community College. After Maria's presentation, Victoria approached me with tears in her eyes. Dr. Chen, I know I can never fully undo the harm I caused, but I want you to know that you didn't just change my foundation, you changed me as a person. You showed me what true excellence looks like, and you gave me the chance to become someone worth respecting. The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. The woman who had once dismissed me as beneath her consideration was now genuinely grateful for the lesson I had taught her. Everyone deserves the chance to grow and change, I replied. What matters is what you do with that opportunity. Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes. I've been thinking about that night 3 years ago, about how differently things might have gone if I had looked beyond your dress and your background to see your actual achievements. How many other brilliant people have I dismissed over the years? How much potential have I wasted because of my prejudices? It was a question that haunted her, and rightfully so, but she was using that guilt constructively, channeling it into efforts to identify and support overlooked talent wherever she found it. The Merit Excellence Research Institute that I had announced at the gala became a reality 18 months later. The facility was everything I had promised and more, a world-class research complex that provided resources and support to brilliant minds, regardless of their educational backgrounds or social connections. The opening ceremony was held on the same date as my original humiliation, exactly 3 years later. The guest list included many of the same people who had witnessed my public destruction, but the dynamics were completely different. Victoria was there, now serving as a volunteer coordinator for the Institute's outreach programs. Madison attended as well, having just completed her master's degree in education policy and preparing to begin doctoral studies focused on eliminating barriers to higher education. Maria Santos cut the ribbon to officially open the genetics research wing, while David Kim demonstrated the artificial intelligence systems that would help scientists around the world collaborate on breakthrough discoveries. Jennifer Williams unveiled the Sustainable Technology Laboratory, where researchers would work on solutions to climate change and environmental degradation. The Institute's mission statement, displayed prominently in the main lobby, reflected everything I had learned about the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize true potential. The Merit Excellence Research Institute exists to support scientific innovation and discovery by providing resources to brilliant minds, regardless of their educational backgrounds, social connections, family wealth, or any other factor unrelated to their intellectual capabilities and dedication to advancing human knowledge. During the opening ceremony, I gave a speech that summarized the journey from humiliation to transformation. 3 years ago, I was told that I lacked the breeding and refinement necessary to represent excellence in academic achievement. Tonight, we open a research facility that will support scientists whose potential has been overlooked by institutions that prioritize appearance over accomplishment, connections over creativity, privilege over passion. The researchers working in these laboratories come from community colleges and Ivy League universities, from wealthy suburbs and inner-city neighborhoods, from families of doctors and families of farm workers. What unites them is not their backgrounds, but their brilliance. Not their pedigrees, but their potential to change the world through science. This institute exists because discrimination is not just morally wrong, it's also incredibly wasteful. When we judge people based on superficial characteristics rather than actual merit, we lose access to some of the most innovative and transformative minds in our society. We can't afford that waste when facing challenges like cancer, climate change, and countless other problems that require the best thinking from the broadest possible range of perspectives. As I concluded my remarks, I looked out at the audience and saw faces that reflected the real diversity of human potential. Graduate students and established researchers, community college transfers, and traditional university graduates. People from every economic background and family situation imaginable, all united by their commitment to advancing knowledge and solving problems. Victoria approached me after the ceremony, her transformation complete and permanent. Dr. Chen, I want to thank you again for what you've done, not just for the Institute or the Foundation reforms, but for teaching me to see people as they really are, rather than as I expected them to be. The credit belongs to you, Victoria. You could have fought the changes, could have refused to learn and grow. Instead, you chose to become a better person. She smiled, and for the first time since I had known her, it was completely genuine and without pretense. I've learned that true refinement isn't about designer clothes or family money. It's about treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. It's about recognizing excellence wherever it appears, even when it doesn't look the way you expected. 6 months after the Institute opened, I received a letter that perfectly encapsulated the transformation that had taken place. It was from a high school student named Carlos Rodriguez, whose family had immigrated from El Salvador when he was 10 years old. Dear Dr. Chen, the letter began, I am writing to thank you for creating the Merit Excellence Research Institute and for proving that background doesn't determine potential. I am a senior at Roosevelt High School, and I have been working on renewable energy research in our school's small science laboratory. Last month, Mrs. Victoria Pemberton visited our school as part of the Pemberton Foundation's new outreach program. She spent time in our science labs, talking with students about their research projects and their dreams for college and careers. When I showed her my work on improving solar panel efficiency, she didn't ask about my family's income or immigration status. She didn't comment on my clothes or worry about whether I would fit in at fancy events. She just looked at my research, asked intelligent questions about my methodology, and told me that my work had real potential to make a difference. Because of her recommendation, I have been accepted to the Merit Excellence Research Institute's high school fellowship program, which will allow me to work alongside your scientists while finishing my senior year. I will also receive a full scholarship to study engineering at the university of my choice. 3 years ago, Mrs. Pemberton would probably have looked at me and seen only a poor immigrant kid who didn't belong in elite academic circles. Today, she sees a future scientist who might help solve the climate crisis. That change in perspective, that ability to recognize potential regardless of packaging, is the greatest gift you could have given to students like me. I kept Carlos's letter on my desk as a reminder of why the confrontation at the Metropolitan Hotel had been necessary. The humiliation I had endured was painful, but it had led to changes that were now opening doors for countless young people who might otherwise have been overlooked. The ripple effects continued to spread. Other foundations and institutions began examining their own selection processes, prompted by the publicity surrounding the Pemberton Foundation's transformation. Universities started tracking the backgrounds of their scholarship recipients to ensure they weren't inadvertently discriminating against qualified candidates from non-traditional backgrounds. Madison completed her doctoral studies and became a professor of education policy, conducting research on barriers to higher education and developing programs to increase access for underrepresented students. Her work was informed by her personal experience with privilege and her understanding of how easily unconscious bias could exclude deserving candidates. Victoria remained active in the reformed Pemberton Foundation and continued her monthly laboratory work even after fulfilling her original commitment. She had developed a genuine love for scientific research and a deep respect for the people who dedicated their lives to advancing knowledge. Working in the laboratory teaches me humility, she explained in one of her final monthly reports. Every day, I see graduate students and postdocs whose intelligence and dedication far exceed anything I ever achieved through my social connections. They remind me that true excellence comes from hard work, intellectual honesty, and commitment to something larger than personal advancement. The Merit Excellence Research Institute continued to grow and expand, adding new research divisions and supporting increasing numbers of scientists from diverse backgrounds. Our cancer treatments saved thousands of lives, our renewable energy technologies were adopted worldwide, and our artificial intelligence systems helped accelerate scientific discovery across multiple fields. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the personal transformation of the people involved. Victoria had evolved from an elitist gatekeeper into a passionate advocate for merit-based opportunity. Madison had grown from an entitled socialite into a dedicated educator, working to expand access to higher education. Even some of the other donors and board members from that original gala had examined their own biases and changed their approaches to philanthropy and scholarship support. 5 years after my humiliation at the Metropolitan Hotel, I was invited to give the commencement address at my own university. As I looked out at the graduating class, I saw faces that reflected the full spectrum of human diversity and potential. 5 years ago, I told the graduates, I was told that I didn't have the proper breeding to represent excellence in academic achievement. Today, I stand before you as proof that excellence comes in many forms, from many backgrounds, and often from the places where people least expect to find it. The most important lesson I can share with you is this: never let anyone else's limited vision of what success should look like prevent you from pursuing your dreams. The people who judge you based on your clothes, your accent, your family's income, or your educational background are revealing their own limitations, not yours. At the same time, I challenge you to examine your own assumptions about others. Look for potential in unexpected places. Recognize excellence even when it doesn't match your preconceived notions. Be the person who opens doors rather than the person who guards them. The world's greatest challenges, disease, climate change, poverty, injustice, will not be solved by people who all look the same, think the same, and come from the same backgrounds. They will be solved by diverse teams of brilliant individuals who bring different perspectives, experiences, and approaches to complex problems. Your job is to be part of that solution, and to make sure that others who deserve the chance get the opportunity to join you. As I concluded my address, I noticed Victoria in the audience, applauding enthusiastically. She had come to see several of the Merit Excellence Research Institute Fellows receive their degrees, students whose potential she had learned to recognize and support. After the ceremony, she approached Lee with a familiar expression of gratitude and reflection. Dr. Chin, watching these young people graduate today reminds me of how close we came to wasting all of this potential. If you hadn't confronted me about my prejudices, how many of these brilliant minds would have been dismissed and discouraged? It was a sobering thought. The transformation that had started with my public humiliation had prevented countless other instances of discrimination and opened opportunities for thousands of deserving students. The important thing, I replied, is that we learned from our mistakes and chose to do better. That's all any of us can do. Victoria nodded, then smiled with the genuine warmth that had replaced her previous artificial politeness. I have something to show you, she said, pulling out her phone. The screen displayed a photo of her latest monthly laboratory report, but this one was different from all the others. What am I looking at? I asked. My application to begin doctoral studies in science education, she replied, her voice filled with excitement. At my age, most people would think I'm crazy to start graduate school. But working in your laboratory has shown me that I want to spend my remaining years helping other people discover the joy of scientific discovery. It was a perfect ending to her transformation. The woman who had once judged people based on their backgrounds was now preparing to dedicate her life to ensuring that others wouldn't face the same barriers she had once created. Today, 10 years after my humiliation at the Metropolitan Hotel, The Merit Excellence Research Institute has become one of the world's leading research facilities. Our scientists have developed treatments for dozens of diseases, created technologies that are helping to address climate change, and trained thousands of researchers who are now working at universities and companies around the globe. The Pemberton Foundation, under its reformed mission and leadership, has supported over 5,000 students who might otherwise have been overlooked by traditional scholarship programs. Their success rate is among the highest in the country, demonstrating definitively that merit-based selection produces better outcomes than selection based on social connections. Victoria, now Dr. Victoria Pemberton, completed her PhD in science education at the age of 62 and currently directs a program that helps other wealthy individuals understand how to identify and support genuine talent regardless of packaging. Her transformation has become a case study used in courses on leadership, ethics, and social change.